plant, on the other hand, or a tree, doesn't actually care if it's being chopped down, if it's being kicked. It cares as much as a rock being kicked would, Matt.
Can you pause?
Yeah.
If you cut a tree, does it not bleed?
And it's a pleasure to meet you. It's really not every day that I have someone as influential as you on my channel. So it really...
Well, no, I care about, anytime when I'm invited to a podcast, the typical invitation reads, well, this is my downloads and this is other famous people we've had, so therefore you should want to do this. And I don't give a rat's ass about any of that. I just care that your heart's in the right place, you have an authentic mission statement, and you're trying to do good in the world. And so you are well above that threshold, in spite of the internet, in spite of the what did you call it? The we got to talk, whatever.
Oh, the clickbait.
Yeah. In spite of the clickbait, that's fine. But it is what it is. So yeah, I'm ready for you.
Yeah, so I think it would be good to start talking about your new book. You included a chapter on the topic of animal ethics, which is what interests me mostly.
Of course, I didn't call it that because that implies that I'm passing judgment for you on how you should think about a subject. But nowhere in the book am I giving you an opinion, because I don't care if you have my opinion. It's my opinion. You should have your own opinion. But if you have an opinion as a scientist, it's incumbent upon me to ask you, how well thought out is your opinion? So that chapter is simply titled Meatarians and Vegetarians, okay? Just to get the symmetry of the word forms. Meatarian is, of course, a less familiar form of just meat eater. But all I do is I talk about meat eaters and vegetarians and whether there are inconsistencies in their thinking as they make strong decisions about their own lives or about the lives of others, because there are whole societies that are trying to change your behavior based on what they are sure is the right thing to do. So I will never put myself in that position because I don't care. I mean, I care, but not in a way to start a movement to change people. I will never tell people what to do. And nowhere in that book do I tell people what to do.
It seems that people can kind of
often... Wait. It might feel that way. This is what I was saying earlier. I put an objective truth, and wait, he's telling me this. Well, I've learned from Twitter, you can't put an opinion out because people will attack it.
Absolutely.
I'm older than you. I remember when opinions were, oh, that's your opinion? Well, that's interesting. Here's my opinion. Okay, now let's go to the pub, right? That's how opinions used to unfold. Now it's you express an opinion, and whoever does not share that opinion attacks it because it does not match their opinion. And that is a world that I still don't understand how we landed there. I mean, of course, social media fed it. Of course, it did that.
Yeah.
But so no, the fact that you thought it was on animal ethics means you put your own lens on that chapter, because nowhere in there does it talk about ethics at all. It references that some people think about it from an ethical point of view, but that is not how I'm addressing those two topics.
Yeah, so I didn't mean to say that you're kind of making normative claims of how we ought to behave, but I guess I would still see it as kind of, you describe some of the treatment of animals, you kind of describe what sentient plants might think, about our treatment of plants. I feel like you're entering the realm of ethics, even if you're not telling people how they ought to behave. And I guess when you're trying to stay in a descriptive, I suppose you found out through Twitter and social media that people can often get confused by that and think you're coming down on how we should behave. And there was a tweet you made where you kind of got a bit of flack. You address it in the book. I think the tweet was, "A cow is a biological machine invented by humans to turn grass into steak." And people kind of saw that as either condoning what was happening to cows or condemning it, which wasn't the point you were making, right?
Yeah, I just thought people would say, well, that's interesting. First, that we invented cows. Maybe they do a little homework on that. And what else? Of course, we also use them for milk, but those are the two primary sources of protein. And so I just said that. And some people said, wow, I never thought about it that way. Oh my gosh, maybe I'll eat less cows, or other, or people. And so, I think the most vocal, visible person who commented was the musician Moby, who said, "How dare you make light of this, the misery of cows, and that it's causing global warming and human health." And he just went, "Oh," it was like, wow. So there's somebody who has an agenda, because everyone knows he's a big animal rights, vegan. Everyone knows that. And so he came to it assuming that I was somehow attacking him or his world or his lifestyle, when it's just information. Now, of course, it's tweetified, right? So it's shortened. It's not a full conversation. But yeah, a biological machine, yeah. What is a machine? You put something on one end and something comes out the other end. That's a machine. So anyhow, yeah. So it turned out I was fascinated to watch the bifurcation of people's reactions. I had a similar one, not related to this book, but this is the kind of insights I was getting on human behavior when, as an educator, I'm trying to communicate with you.
Is there any possibility you'd kind of put the speculation to bed and kind of give your views on what you think about society's current treatment of farmed animals?
I'm a public figure, so my opinions carry vastly more weight than I want them to.
Yeah.
Because if someone says, "How do you feel about this?" Watch. They say, "How do you?" And I feel this way. Then there's a headline: "Tyson wants you to do XYZ elemental P," when that's not what I said. I have an opinion. But I don't have a goal to impart my opinions on others. But it comes across that way if someone asks me my opinion. And because I'm not part of movements, I don't march, I don't carry placards, I don't sign petitions. All of these are forces operating in the world to get one group's opinion to change the views of another group. I don't belong to any of these groups. That doesn't mean I don't have views that resonate with them. Certainly I do. It doesn't mean I don't have opinions. I do. And so you want to have the opinion, and then this is going to go up online because, "Oh, Tyson's got an opinion, let me attack it." No, I'm not going to do that. No, I'm a scientist. I want your opinion to be formed in such a way that you didn't miss any elements of it. Yeah. Someone mentioned my analogy of mice in the basement. I'm happy to talk about anything in the book.
Let's talk about the sentient alien plants thought experiment, though.
Love to.
Yeah.
Love to. So I was imagining what would it be like. By the way, throughout the book, intermittently I throw in what an alien might think as they observe our ways and means. Okay. Oh, by the way, you went straight to the sentient alien, but I went there only after I made the point that a person who wants to protect mice in their basement, not kill them, and so you humanely trap them, and then what do you do typically? Well, you let them back out into the wild, all right? If you have mice in your basement, typically you live in a place where you don't have to walk very far to re-release them out into the wild, okay? So then you feel good about that because you don't want to harm or kill animals. You're probably a vegetarian. Okay, I don't have a problem with that. But consider that if you care about the life of the mouse, the best thing you can do for a mouse is to leave it in your basement. Because when you re-release it to the wild, the life expectancy of a mouse in the wild is between 9 and 18 months. Guaranteed to be eaten. They're tasty grubs for owls, hawks, foxes, other woodland predators that thrive in the wood. Leave it in your basement, it'll live up to 6 years. But you're not doing that. So your actions are not really in the best interest of the mouse. If you want to still trap the mouse and put it outside, I don't have a problem with that. But don't tell me this is good for the mouse. Because there's other things you could do for that mouse that are way better for it. So that's one point of have you really thought it through that I make there. and I'm not offering opinion. I'm just saying, think this through. Another point in that same example is you're probably, unless you're in the Flintstones cartoon, you're probably living in a home made of wood. And a typical home, American homes are bigger than in Europe typically, but in America, a home would be made from the wood of about 50 trees. You can do the math on that. And wood goes into the floorboards and the what we call the 2x4s, which are that builds up the framing of the house and the structural members and the sidings. All of this is made of wood. Each of those trees might have lived 100 years. 100 years, but they're cut down. This is a tree which each day in the summer produces 15 times the mass of that mouse in breathable oxygen. You just cut it down to build your house. And you're fine with that. Oh, but you got to save the mouse. That'll now live for 18 months. So my question to you is, what do you think nature cares more about? The 1-ounce mouse or the 30-ton tree that provides oxygen and is home for birds and squirrels and mushrooms and insects? Who do you think nature cares more about? And I leave it there. Just think about that. Okay, now that we're talking about plants, I say to myself, okay, imagine an alien.
So sorry, can I comment a few things on the mouse? Because I think I agree with what you're saying, and I think this is.
Oh, by the way, just a quick point. Because they're not opinions, it's not a matter of whether you agree. I'm just telling you what trees are, and I'm
so sorry.
So it's not an agree. I agree that
we missed the. I agree that people who are trying to save the mouse are missing a bigger picture. Is what I'm saying.
So one of the things I think's cool about this example is that it highlights the romanticization and idealization we have with nature as well. I think we often see like nature as being this kind of rosy, wonderful place to live, when actually it's like very brutal for a lot of animals. And what I think is really important,
brutal for plant life too. I mean, it's brutal for all life. Yes.
This thinking of the bigger picture and the knock-on effects of our actions, and not just the direct effect that is in front of us. I think maybe I'm just trying to think about like kind of vegans and animal advocates listening to this, and one place where they might feel frustrated is that like they could say, okay, you're right. People who are trying to avoid directly harming the mouse are missing the point, but we should also. It seems maybe unfair not to mention the fact that the vast majority of people seem to be missing a more obvious moral atrocity, which is our treatment of farmed animals, chickens, pigs, and cows that we just kind of ignore.
Okay, hold on. I'm only talking about people who are saving mice in their basement. And now you're pivoting to some whole other conversation that I'm not having in this moment. In this moment, I'm only referencing the people who might still share all of those other views, but a piece of that holistic behavior that they've brought upon themselves involves this mouse. And so it's a separate conversation about agri-farming and all. That's a whole other conversation that we could talk about. So I do address it a little bit in the book in the same way, by the way. And so, but yeah, if a vegan is listening to this and they're not actually further paying attention to this example and want to jump to another example, so that's a different way to have a conversation. So
I suppose on the point about the trees,
mouse, then you can change the subject. Are we done with the mouse and the tree? Because it's that sequence from the mouse to the tree that got me to the sentient alien, okay, plant alien. Yeah. And so so do you want to still say something, or should I continue with the sentient plant alien?
Let's go to the sentient alien.
By the way, in the United States, we invented a term for people who, when they hear an argument, rather than discuss the argument, they go to something else that's either worse or different. It's called whataboutism. Okay, so we talk about the mouse, and you say, okay, fine, but what about farm animals, right? It's called whataboutism. which completely shifts a conversation to something where you want to make some other point. So it's something to be aware of when you're in a conversation. It's just called whataboutism.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever heard the term? I don't know. It's kind of a fun. I think it has too many syllables, but it still makes its point. So here we are with the sentient alien. So imagine an alien that is completely a plant. It's a plant, a sentient plant. Just imagine this. I wouldn't know what that would be like, but just like part of a cosmic perspective is to just think about things differently from how you always have. So now we have a plant. By the way, on their home planet, there are no restaurants, there are no kitchens, there's no food production, there's no supply chain, there's none of that. They just lay out under the sun and they get all their nourishment. Okay, and so they can take long trips through space because they just lay out under the lamp. All right, and that's because they photosynthesize. All right, this is how they get their energy. All right, and they heard that Earth in the catalog, you know, the tourist catalog, that Earth has a raging biodiversity. Okay, and they want to sort of look in on their plant brethren, and so then they arrive. And then they find humans. They won't really understand humans because humans are animals, right? And they're plants. So they won't think much. They'll just care about the plants. And they'll see the tree, the giant sequoia lives 1,000 years. They'll see all kinds of plant life. They'll be very impressed. But then they'll notice that there's a subset of humans who specifically target plants to eat. They'll be terrified by this, okay? Because they're plants. They might get grabbed and stolen and eaten and corralled. And so then they look more closely and they go to, we have there's Whole Foods in the UK. I don't know. There's a nature store, a nature grocery store. And they'll see the produce aisle. And then they'll see that the foods that this subset of humans target, let's just broadly call them vegetarians, they seek out the reproductive organs of the plants, which are the nuts, the berries, the sprouts, the flowers. They're specifically extracted and consumed. This freaks them out even more. And then they look closer and then they find that this community further targets the baby versions of those plants. Baby carrots, baby mushrooms, baby spinach, baby artichokes. The list goes on and on. And they would just freak out. And they'd run back home and say, there's a terrifying life form that all they want to do is eat our babies, eat our spores, and they target us. And so if you haven't thought about it that way, I think that's interesting because as a vegetarian, typically you don't think anything of eating the sprouts. All the plant is trying to do is make a copy of itself. You're not saying, well, let the plant live some kind of life first, and then I'll eat it. All right. So a lot of the corresponding thinking that goes on with animal rights, broadly animal rights, or rather just animal treatment, I think is the more appropriate term for that sentence. Animal treatment is if they lead a life with a free range and then you eat them, that's better for the animal. So that way of thinking is not applied to plants because somebody has judged on Earth, somebody has judged that animal life has higher value than plant life. And they've adjusted their eating habits accordingly. So that alien example is just simply an exercise. By the way, E.T., we've all seen the movie E.T. It's from the 80s. You got to go back in the archives for it. E.T. was conceived as a plant, not as an animal. And that's why you remember E.T. could come up to plants and touch its finger, and the plant would come back to life. It had sort of power over plant life because it was actually conceived as a plant. And and I know that because I had a conversation with Steven Spielberg about it. That's as he originally conceived that character.
If I visited another planet and found what appeared to be humans who couldn't move, who were being decapitated and slaughtered and eaten by sentient plants, then I would likely be horrified. I mean, I've evolved to empathize with beings who look like me. But I think if the situation is truly analogous to your situation, to your hypothetical, then I would be mistaken in thinking that these humanoid creatures were sentient. So while the sentient plants in your hypothetical would likely be terrified if they saw what we were doing to plants on our planet, I think crucially they would be mistaken if they were to think that, like them, the plants on our planet were sentient beings who cared what were happening to them. Because as far as we know, the plants on our planet care about getting cut down or kicked to the same extent as a rock cares about being kicked down the street. There's nothing it is like to be them. And of course, the same can't be said for the chickens, pigs, cows, and other farmed animals who are being tortured on planet Earth for trivial reasons.
I've not used the word sentient this entire time. So if you want to talk about sentience, that's another conversation.
Yeah.
Well, you're assuming that the alien...
Oh, sorry, I said the plants were sentient in that they had thoughts and things. Yes, I did say it, but not in terms of the valuing one life over another for that reason. So my point there is, I think we would all agree, if we agree on the definitions of words, that a mouse is sentient and a tree is not.
Yes.
Okay. We are sentient, so we value the mouse because it shares this feature of life with us. And we value the mouse above the life of the mouse, above the life of plants, because plants do not share this feature that we value. Okay, let's take it from there. So what
my thinking is that when it comes to ethical questions, the key perspective to take is, what if it were me? What if I was in that perspective? When it comes to a mouse, if I kick a mouse down the street, it has an interest in not being kicked down the street. The mouse itself cares about whether that's happening. A plant, on the other hand, or a tree, doesn't actually care if it's being chopped down, if it's being kicked. It cares as much as a rock being kicked would, Matt.
Can you pause?
Yeah.
If you cut a tree, does it not bleed?
Yeah.
If you cloak a tree, does it not wilt?
Yes.
If you withdraw nutrients from a tree and water, does it not wither and die?
Mm-hmm.
So you've introduced this concept of sentience because the way we've defined it, plant life does not have it. But the plant life definitely does not want to die.
The plant doesn't want for anything.
If you cut away some of its roots, it's going to try to grow new roots. If you cut away branches, it'll try to grow another branch. If you cloak one side of it, it will get extra nutrients from one side and try to feed the part that doesn't. It's got a whole thing going on. It has a circulation system. And so that's how you know, if, like I said, if you cut away at the roots, the very top leaves will wilt. And so there are people say, well, we have a beating heart and the tree does not. Maybe the tree, another way to think about it is, the tree has circulation and it doesn't need a beating heart. It's not that it doesn't have one and could have one and should have one. It doesn't have one, doesn't need one. And it still maintains a circulation, and it could live 1,000 years. Well, the biggest of them. So I'm here defending trees as something that I think, and here's my opinion, I think nature cares more about the tree than your mouse. And I'd want to hear an argument that is the opposite of that.
To ask what does nature care about is similar to asking what does a rock falling down a mountain care about? Nature has no goals or desires. It does not care about anything.
So let me not use the word care, because that implies emotions and things. Let me just say the role of the tree in the biosphere relative to the role of a mouse in the biosphere are very different. And I would declare, probably without rebuttal, that the value of the tree in the biosphere to other life forms, because the biosphere is what that is, it's the interplay of life forms, is greater than the value of the mouse to the mouse in your basement to the biosphere. And so that doesn't use the word care. The word value I'm using in terms of its role in serving the livelihood of other life forms.
Yeah, so yeah, I see what you're saying. I think that the tree could have instrumental value that affects more sentient beings compared to the mouse. But I do think that the mouse has this inherent value in that they can suffer. What happens to them matters for their own sake, which can't be said for the tree, in my opinion.
It bleeds when you cut it.
As an animal advocate who's often trying to raise awareness about the suffering of farmed animals, I'll often hear people, meat eaters, saying to me, well, you eat plants, you're a plant murderer. And it often feels like these people aren't being genuine, about their concern for the ethical treatment of plants. But they're more, for want of a better term, trolling to try and piss animal advocates off. Is there a sense in which you're trolling here? Or are you being serious?
It will try to heal itself, okay? If you cut it, it'll try to close the wound.
Let's say Neil is going to be reborn. So after you die, you're going to be reborn. There's a 50% chance that you're reborn as a carrot as they're being peeled, and a 50% chance of you being born as a cow while they're being skinned alive. Which would you be more worried about?
I'd much rather be a peeled carrot. Sure.
Why?
Because I don't hear the carrot screaming. Plus, I'll eat the carrot at the end pretty quickly. Yeah. Oh, of course. By all means.
Yeah.
And
so
a
I
carrot,
feel like
by the way, grows in one season. Cow lives many, many years. So I think it's possible. I mean, you just took my example of a tree and turned it into a carrot. I'm not saying I'm not saying all life has the same value as a tree. I'm not saying all plant life has the same value of a tree. You just took my tree example and turned it into a carrot, which is fine to make your point. But I am not equally valuing all plant life in that example. I only mentioned trees because the vegetarian who saves the mouse built a home out of trees. They didn't build a home out of carrots. So this is, so I guess you pivoted my example to carrots, and then you went from a mouse to a cow and a tree to a carrot.
We can use tree. It doesn't actually matter for the point I'm making.
Well, then stick with the tree and the mouse.
Okay, so would you rather be a tree being cut down or a cow being skinned alive?
If I'm a tree that lives 1,000 years and I'm looking at this holistically for the earth, I would say definitely skin the cow, because the tree relative to the cow has way more value to the ecosystem by far. Personally, yeah.
But so you have to experience what it's like for the tree or what it's like for the cow. I'm saying you have to choose which one you'd have to go through. Would you rather be what it's like to be a tree being cut down, or experience what it's like for the cow to be skinned?
I don't know, because I'm not a plant, but I'm an animal. In fact, I'm a mammal, just like a cow is. So I would experience a lot of similarity to what I expect the cow to experience in death, right? So I'm not a tree. And by the way, I'm not one of these who say that plants scream when they're cut. I'm not one of these folks. Okay, that's a whole other branch of people who care about plants.
If you're choosing between a cow being skinned or the tree being cut down, you would save the tree. And I feel like
your argument.
Well, hold on. Nature, the value of the tree to nature vastly exceeds the value of the cow to nature. Okay, just to make it clear. And by the way, let me remind your viewers, listeners, you turn the mouse into a cow. Okay, just so we know, just so we understand. I'm not saying all animals are equal in this, and I'm not saying all plants are equal in this. I gave a very specific example. It was the vegetarian saving the mouse living in a house made of wood. So you're trying to turn our discussion into things that are points that I don't make, because the points I'm making are very specific. They're not generalizations about everything.
Well, I apologize.
Yeah, we can go animal by animal,
not my
plant by plant, and there might be a point where the animal matters as much to the environment as the tree does, right? And then we can ask nature, which do you care more about? And nature say, well, this supports these creatures. Like you look at beavers that make a dam, that create this, and so there's.
We have to make a distinction, I think, between like instrumental value and inherent or intrinsic value. So we can say that like the tree has higher value overall because of all of the instrumental value that it provides for other living beings.
To nature, yes.
So I'm going to give you a hypothetical to try and deal with that aspect of it, where we say it's like an isolated tree that isn't connected. Maybe it's in my house. It's not connected to the rest of nature, and it's an isolated cow. And we're choosing between skinning the cow or chopping down the isolated tree. So we're dealing just with the intrinsic value, how you value them.
Okay, wait. So you want to change the mouse into a cow? You want to do that for this example? Because my example was not with cows, just to be clear.
Yeah, my example was with cows, but we can do it with the mouse. It makes no difference to me.
If it makes no difference, it makes a difference to me. So we should go to the mouse. Now go on.
So yeah, you're choosing between chopping down the tree and skinning the mouse alive. So we're dealing purely with the how you value each being, not the instrumental effects of how they affect an ecosystem.
Yeah, I don't care how you value anything. I care. You value it however you want. Whatever is your own equation, it doesn't matter to me. The only perspective I was offering is, how does it matter to nature?
Nature isn't an agent.
If you haven't, maybe there's some insights you can glean from that. And if you have, and you still want to continue as you were, then go ahead. I'm not going to stop you.
Yeah, but I'm wondering, away from the instrumental effects on the ecosystem, how you value these two different beings, whether you really see the plight of the tree as analogous to the plight of the mouse, or whether you see a key difference between them.
You're asking me, and I'm saying, in this example, I'm a cosmic perspective brought to you as an observer of an ecosystem, of a biosphere, and in that biosphere, the role of the tree is vastly greater than the role of the mouse. And that is not an expression of an opinion here. When you add up what a tree does for the atmosphere, giving oxygen into the atmosphere every day of its life. Like I said, you can measure this. It's 15 times the mass of the mouse in O2, in oxygen. Yeah. Its role in the biosphere vastly exceeds that of the mouse. So from that perspective, you should, whether the mouse lives or dies should matter more to you if you carry that perspective than whether the tree lives or dies.
And do you...
And I said, when you cut a tree, it bleeds. It definitely bleeds.
But is that morally relevant?
I think... You want to talk about morals? That morals have... By the way, the book addresses things that you might fold into your moral compass, for sure, but I'm not handing anyone their morals.
But why did you just say when you cut a tree it bleeds? It feels like you're trying to make a point that you see as morally relevant.
Okay, then I won't use the word bleed. There's circulating fluid in a tree that oozes out of it when you cut it. I think bleed is a pretty good word for that.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
If it needs to bleed, it will die. Is bleed the not? What word would you say?
I'm happy with the word bleed. What I'm saying is I don't see why that matters. Why does it matter that the tree bleeds?
I was used because you were talking about because when you cut the mouse bleeds. They both bleed when you cut them.
No, so I don't. It's not like I inherently care about the bleeding of the mouse. What I care about is the experience of the mouse. That like suffering feels bad for the mouse, whereas the tree, as far as we know, is no experience. It is not. It is not like anything to be the tree. And I just feel like it's important to acknowledge that there's a huge difference.
That's very biased of you as a human being with a brain and a beating heart. You've taken the tree of life, which is an extraordinarily richly diverse expression of ways of being alive, and you've taken things that are closest to you, did a carve out on that tree of life, and said, this has a moral code higher than I'm going to protect and preserve this. Just, I don't care that you do that. I just want you to be self-aware that that is what you're doing.
Right.
Just be aware that all the rest of life on Earth, the biomass that greatly outweighs the animal of plant life, it greatly outweighs the mass of animal life. That you have value judged it by whatever is your code of ethics, of morality, and say you're closer to me. It's like the people who want to protect dolphins. Dolphins have big brains. They're surely sentient, so I don't want to kill a dolphin, but I'll kill a tuna fish and eat the tuna fish. Well, they're both animals trying to survive in the ocean. They're both trying to survive. They both don't want to die. But you've done a carve out because of your own perspective, which is as a human on one skinny branch in the tree of life. Coming from the outside, there's countless branches in the tree of life, countless genera in the tree of life. Did I say that word right? Genera? The family of genuses. Genera, I think. Okay, value it. Go ahead. Just the way our sentient plant aliens valued their life. And they passed judgment on you. I might even expect that for any life form. But all I'm saying is, whatever you do, just make sure you see the rest of this and then land wherever you do.
Why did you decide to make the alien plant life sentient in your thought experiment?
Because I wanted to highlight the interesting fact that some of the tastiest vegetarian food you can buy are the reproductive organs and the baby versions of those life forms. I don't think that's commonly reflected upon in that way. And so that was an exercise in, and that has analogy to animal life, right? People eat younger animals because the meat is more tender than older animals. People eat lamb instead of sheep. You can eat sheep, it's just not as tender. People eat calves instead of, for veal. We even have whole words for the young version of it. So I wanted to show that there's a corresponding action and vocabulary to those who eat meat as well as those who eat plants. That was the point of that exercise.
Yeah. It just seems like the alien plants being sentient means that they can be horrified by what's happening and be emotionally distressed. Whereas if they weren't sentient, you couldn't have had that. There's kind of no one to feel sorry for, which seems to be the morally relevant distinction, along with how I value things, which is caring about the experience of others.
So yeah, I guess from a cosmic perspective, the tree of life is this remarkable thing that we have here on Earth. And the tree of life, I don't think the tree of life makes a moral distinction about anything on it. It has to do with what role does it play in the biosphere and how valued is it relative to the life of other things. So, plus, of course, nature, like you said earlier in the conversation, nature is, what do you say? We have this glorification of nature like it's this beautiful place. When it is evil, it will kill you. The fact that more than 95% of all species of life that has ever existed is now extinct at the hand of nature is evidence that while nature loves life, it has no particular investment in one species relative to another. That
or their
species
well-being
has to do all it can to survive, and if it can't because it got crowded out by another species in the predator-prey example, or it got shadowed out by another plant whose leaves prevented sunlight, you will go out, and nature won't care about you. You're just another lost species because you lost at the hands of other life forms that were better at surviving than you were. And that's so the code of the wild, as it is, natural selection.
I think it was Nick Bostrom who said, had Mother Nature been a real parent, she'd be in jail for child abuse.
Well, I would think of it the other way. Had it been a real parent, no species would go extinct. You see, that's another way, that very same fact. They'd actually be nurturing each species, yes.
Have you ever wondered why we have this tendency to idealize and romanticize nature as we do?
I don't think we always did. If you go back 19th century and earlier, we cared about nature in the sense that there are these life forms we've never seen, and before photography, every scientist would go on the road with an artist if they were not themselves an artist, and they'd come back, and nature books and travel books were some of the most heavily sought after publications of the day, the late 1700s and throughout the 1800s. And they were part and parcel with the colonistic ways of Europe, right? They would go see what was exotic to them, trees and animals and people. And so they'd come back with their books of the natives, of the plants, of the flowers, the birds, especially, as we know from the Audubon series. So I don't know that at the time people said, "Oh, nature is beautiful and balanced." No, I don't think that. I think that's a more modern concept, based on my read and what I could glean from these books. There aren't people saying, "Let me go back to nature," right? They would say, "No, I want civilization where I have a food supply chain and I don't have to go hunt for my food and possibly not get it tomorrow." All right. I think people were really liking civilization going into the 20th century. And so when there was there's always been vegetarians out there, for religious reasons more than for other reasons that today we might cite with regarding health or the environment. But it seems to me to be more modern. That's all. I could be wrong, but I just based on my sense of things, that's what it feels like. Teddy Roosevelt and another, which president was it? Just after him, decided to declare parks as a national preserve. Okay, so that was 100 some years ago in the United States, to take nature and say, this is really beautiful, let's protect it in this way. And I don't know that Europe felt the same way about parks that early, because the United States has all this land and all of this, so there's a movement that's basically 100 years old to preserve and protect nature.
Yeah, I also wonder if there's kind of some kind of arbitrariness to what we call nature and what isn't nature, where someone could say that human-built skyscrapers are natural because we are a species who evolved to build them.
I'm in that camp. To me, cities are nature because that's what we build. The same way a beaver dam is nature, that's what the beaver built. All right, so that's what I think. And yes, we step on the toes of other life forms. So does a dam. We like to praise the dam. Oh, it creates an environment for other life. Before the beaver got there, it was a completely different ecosystem. All right. And so, we're going to praise the beaver now because the beaver is on the ring of engineering schools as a symbol of their engineering, So, and a point I make in the book, in the chapter on body and mind, is it? Or I don't think it's in the meat eaters and vegetarians. I just comment the people who want to protect some animals and not others. That's weird to me as a scientist and one who carries a cosmic perspective. All right. There's, save the whatever. Pick a something that people have wanted to save, okay? And is there a corresponding movement to save the leeches, or to save the ticks? Suppose that leeches or the ticks were on the brink of extinction. Would there be a movement among the nature lovers to say, save the ticks? I don't think so. If the rats were going to go extinct, would someone say, save the rats? And have marches with placards. So we are very particular about the animals we like.
I'd like to end on this one thought experiment. I'd love to give you another alien thought experiment where we imagine, and it's one I gave to my mother actually when I was a young boy. If you imagine super intelligent aliens who come down to Earth, and the difference in intelligence between us and the aliens is perhaps similar to the difference between Neil deGrasse Tyson and a chicken.
And
that would be just a human and a chicken. Okay, fine.
Aliens, super intelligent aliens, come down and they see us. They can see that we suffer, we have relationships with each other, but we're also very tasty to them. So they decide to stick us in cages, in large sheds, thousands of us, take our babies away, and slaughter and eat us. Would this be analogous to what we're doing to the chickens, the cows and pigs who are less intelligent than us?
I think it's entirely analogous.
Well, it's certainly been a very interesting and engaging conversation. As I said at the start,
and thanks for your points and your perspectives on this. And I know you probably have a huge following that's all resonates with what you say and the ideas. Like I said, I'm not here to change anybody. I was giving as many points of inconsistency among meat eaters as I was with speciesist vegetarians who were picking this part of the tree of life versus another part. So it's just think about it and come back to it. If you don't want to think about it, I guess that's okay too. But don't claim you have a deeply reasoned perspective.
So I really enjoy in your writing this tendency you have to zoom out from the human perspective and see things from a different point of view. But I wonder if something that's sometimes missing from your thinking here is a perspective taking that's very important when it comes to ethical questions. And that's asking ourselves, what if it were me? This seems to be the important perspective to take when it comes to morality. And when we do this kind of perspective taking, asking ourselves, what if it were me? It becomes very obvious why vegans and vegetarians are drawing the line at plant life, because as far as we know, it doesn't feel like anything to be a plant, to be a tree. Even if they bleed, that doesn't mean that they're experiencing something. And of course, the same cannot be said for the chickens, pigs, cows, and fish who are
I don't think
animals.
Plants want to die either, by the way, just my point.
Do you think plants consciously want anything?
It's not about consciousness. It's about value to the environment. Like I said, I'm not making this about consciousness.
Why are you making it about value to the environment?
What we think is consciousness in other animals. That's the species. That's this branch of the tree of life. They have consciousness. There's this other branch where they have photosynthesis. There's another branch where they have mushrooms that do what they do. All right. And so everybody's got their thing. So, all right. I don't.
But do you not see it as morally relevant that not everything actually cares about what happens to it? So that the mushroom doesn't care if you kick it down the street, whereas, a dog certainly would.
I'm not in a position to judge that. I don't believe I can judge what a tree's. I've never been a tree. Okay. So for you to say, I've never been a tree either, but I know it doesn't feel pain and it doesn't care that it's cut down, that's kind of audacious of you. Now, by the way, I mostly agree with you. Okay.
That's audacious of you.
But no, in the sense that probably trees don't feel pain in the way animals feel pain. That was never a point of my discussion. It was just the relevance to nature, to the biosphere. That's all.
Yeah.
By the way, if really smart aliens came, it would be in our interest to convince them that they need us alive. We have to find some way to serve them. and have them to eat other animals and not us. Or bring in the vegetarians. Oh, these leaves really tasty compared to my flesh.
Exactly. We'll try to convince them that there's nothing morally wrong with eating the plants, but there is with us.
Exactly.
That's very good.
Exactly. So I do. Well, thanks for checking in on me. You called me out of the ether to show up on your show, and I was delighted to do so. And always good to have an intelligent conversation, as we just did.
Hey guys, you've now reached the end of the conversation with Neil, and I just want to say that I really do appreciate Neil coming onto the channel to have this conversation with me. If the conversation was longer, there is a lot more I would have wanted to say, and presumably that's the same for Neil as well. I think it can be interesting to consider different ways of viewing the world and different ways of thinking about morality. But notice that we don't think it's necessary to go through these kinds of thought experiments when it comes to deciding, for example, whether it's bad to torture human children. Torturing human children, for lack of a better word, is bad. Now, if we were beings who didn't have empathy for other conscious beings and only cared about things unrelated to consciousness, then maybe human children being burned alive wouldn't be a problem to us. But we do have empathy for the conscious experience of other sentient beings, and it's good that we do. I hope that someday it will be seen as uncontroversial that, insofar as we can affect things, we want the universe to be a good place to live. And if we want the universe to be a good place to live, then what matters are the experiences of beings who can have good and bad experiences. So there you go, that's my take, and I really do hope that one day it becomes the dominant perspective. Just a reminder that these videos are only possible because of people like you who are supporting me on Patreon. So if you find my content valuable in some way, please do consider supporting me because it really makes a difference. And to the people who are already supporting me, thank you so much for making this possible. I'm able to spend my time not only on YouTube videos like this one, but also to work on this bigger project, this documentary that I've been making for the last few years. And this is only possible because of the support of people like you. So thank you so much. Anyway, I think it was really cool for Neil to come onto my channel and have that conversation. And that's it for now. See you later.